A review of the book Escape from Camp 14, written by Blair Hardin and presented here by Melanie Montgomery. This book tells the story of one man's remarkable escape from a labor prison camp in 2005. When you see pictures of prisoners that came out of concentration camps, you think of Nazi Germany and a time in the distant past. Looking at these skeleton figures, one wonders, how are they still alive? How could this have happened? How could this have happened to children? Why didn't anybody stop this from happening? What if I tell you that concentration camps are happening today, right this minute? Some people are in these camps for no other reason that they were born there, born into slave labor with no hope for release. This very sad but true story is about Shin Dong-hook. He grew up in a labor prison camp, enduring starvation and cruel and torturous upbringing. Then his amazing escape from North Korea to freedom in the West. Shin's remarkable escape happened when he was 23 years old, but he knew nothing of the outside world when he was growing up. He was born and raised in a North Korean political work camp known as Camp 14. He remembers when he was young, the morning started by waking up after sleeping on nothing more than a concrete floor. There were no beds, no chairs, no tables. The single light bulb in the kitchen that was shared by 4 families only had electricity on from 4 to 5 in the morning and 10 to 11 at night. There were no baths or showers because there was no running water. The selection for breakfast was corn porridge, pickled cabbage, and cabbage soup. And for dinner, the same. It was the same every day, every month, every year. Then off to work, down the steep drift with a handful of coal workers, all the same age, deep into the coal mine to load the coal into the 2-ton ore car and then push it uphill to the entrance of the mine. In order to meet the quota, this was done 4 times a day. 6 souls loading and pushing the ore cart uphill, putting all their energy into finishing their task. But one day while on the 3rd trip, a girl slipped while pushing the heavy ore car, and the cold steel wheel ran over her foot, crushing her big toe. She was 10 years old. All of her co-workers in the mine were roughly the same age. These are some of the conditions that Blair Hardin describes in his book, Escape from Camp 14. Shin Dong-hook has testified to the atrocities that he has suffered and witnessed. The following are some of his interviews and experiences.
It's not comparable to any other nation in the world. Terrible human rights violations beyond anyone's imagination. Those things are happening in North Korea right now.
Shin Dong-hyuk not only escaped a prison camp, but he's on a mission to tell you everything he knows.
Well, I was born in a political prison camp in North Korea. I was expected to just do manual labor and to work. And I had no concept, I had no rights, I had no concept of what human rights were. I was destined to live and die in this prison camp. Well, all the inmates know that the prison camp is surrounded by electrified fence and that there are prison guards that stand guard. However, there was no way for the prisoners to know what was beyond the electrified fence, whether it was another world of prison camps, and there was no way for us to know. Even going further than that, my own mother and father never talked to me about the outside world. I know that my mother and father met and were quote-unquote married in the camp. My guess is that they themselves were sent at a very early age to the prison camp, and that's how they ended up being in the camp and how they met one another. I witnessed my mother's public execution in the camp at the age of 14, and the result of that was that myself was very severely mistreated and went through a terrible suffering regarding that. I never questioned or doubted what my life was all about in the prison camp. Of course, now when I look back, I lived a very terrible and horrible existence, obviously. There are other defectors who have been incarcerated in the political prison camp system in North Korea and were able to either escape successfully or were released and then escape North Korea. We all know the new young leader, Kim Jong-un, is a dictator, just like his grandfather and his father, who was given a dictatorship. To me personally, I have no expectation that he will be any different or will rule differently from his father or grandfather.
Kim Il-sung, leader of North Korea from 1948 to 1991, decided that anyone who is not loyal to his government would be the enemy. He implemented a policy to cut the enemy out. 3 generations of a family must pay for the sins of the traitor. An entire family, mother, fathers, aunts, uncles, nephews, nieces, were all sent to political labor camps. You could be set free from some camps, but other prisons, like Camp 14, a no-release camp, there was no freedom except in death. This policy has been carried down 3 generations, which the current leader, Kim Jong-un, still has enforced. Shin's first memory is of an execution. He was 4 years old. At dozens of executions in years to come, he would listen to his supervising guard tell the crowd that the prisoner about to die had been offered redemption through hard labor, but had rejected the generosity of the North Korean government. Hunger was a constant reminder of the lack of food they had to eat in the camp. They would catch rats and gather kernels of corn in the field to help satisfy their endless hunger. Shin would even look in cow dung for undigested kernels and ate them right away if any were found. The camp had 10 rules, like the 10 Commandments, the children had to memorize. Rule 1. Do not try to escape. Anyone caught escaping will be shot immediately. Rule 2. No more than 2 prisoners can meet together. Rule 3. Do not steal. Anyone who steals or conceals any foodstuff will be shot immediately. The guards in Shin's camp were also his teachers. He remembers one day in June 1989, his teacher was in a bad mood and he began searching pockets, and when he found corn, he erupted. He yelled 5 kernels of corn. They all belonged to a little girl who was short, slight, and as Shin remembers, exceptionally pretty. The teacher yelled, "You bitch! You stole corn! You want your hands cut off?" He ordered the girl to the front of the class and told her to kneel. Swinging his long wooden pointer, he struck her in the head again and again. This lasted for hours. As Shin and his classmates watched in silence, lumps puffed up on her skull, blood leaked from her nose, and she toppled over to the concrete floor. Shin and several other classmates picked her up and carried her home to the pig farm not far from school. Later that night, she died. Subsection 3 of Camp 14's 3rd rule says, anyone who steals or conceals any foodstuff will be shot immediately. Shin did not have any feelings for his mother or father. He did not know what the concept of love meant. One night, Shin overheard his mother and older brother talking about escaping. Wanting to follow the camp rules, and in hopes of getting a food reward, he told the night guard about the escape plan. The next morning at school, he was summoned by the guards. He thought it was going to be his reward. Little did he know, he was going to spend the next 7 months in an underground prison. The guards interrogated Shin about the escape plan. Shin was cruelly tortured, leaving horrible scars. He was only 13 years old. Shin would eventually figure out that the night guard had claimed all the credit for discovering the escape plan. When reporting back to his superiors, he had not mentioned Shin's role. Shin only survived the underground prison with the help of a cellmate whom he called Uncle. Uncle would tell Shin stories and describe what food outside the fence looked, smelled, and tasted like. His loving descriptions of roasting pork, boiling chicken, and eating clams at the seashore helps Shin survive. Shin grew stronger and healed from his injuries. One day the guards came and blindfolded him, and when the blindfold came off, he was at the killing fields where he witnessed 2 or 3 executions a year since he was a toddler. Shin thought he was going to be executed, but then his mother and brother were dragged out. The guards dragged his mother to the gallows. Shin saw that she looked bloated. They forced her to stand on a wooden box and gagged her, tied her arms behind her back, and tightened the noose around her neck. They did not cover her swollen eyes. She scanned the crowd for Shin and found him. He refused to hold her gaze. When guards pulled away the box, she jerked around desperately. As he watched his mother struggle, Shin thought she deserved to die. Shin's brother looked gaunt and frail as guards tied him to a wooden post. 3 guards fired their rifles 3 times. Bullets snapped the rope that held his forehead to the pole. It was a bloody, brain-splattered mess of a killing, a spectacle that sickened and frightened Shin, but he thought his brother too had deserved it. Shin struggles to this day about what he did. He tries to keep what he did hidden from the outside world, but eventually told the truth about what he did to his mother and brother. In the summer of 2004, while working at the garment factory in the camp, Shin was carrying a sewing machine up a flight of stairs on his back. It slipped from his grasp, and the sewing machine tumbled down the stairwell and was broken beyond repair. As punishment for dropping a sewing machine, guards used a knife to cut off Shin's right middle finger at the first knuckle. Shin carries many scars from the camp. North Korea insists that there are no human rights violations, but deny access to investigators.
Bright and early for their daily races, going nowhere, going nowhere. And I find it kind of funny, I find it kind of sad. The dreams in which I'm dying are the best I've ever had. I find it hard to tell you, I find it hard to take. When people run in circles, it's a very, very bad world. Mad world.
In the garment factory, Shin met Park. Shin was supposed to train him, but more importantly, he was supposed to tell the guards everything that Park did and said. But for the first time in his life, he decided not to tell and became friends with Park. Blaine Harden explains the escape and life after the camp.
As you can see from this slide, the camps have existed twice as long as the camps in the Soviet Union, about 12 times as long as the camps in Hitler's Germany. And the reason? North Korea seems to have lost none of its appetite for being cruel to its own people. They're just as cruel now as they were 50 years ago. The camps are operated in almost exactly the same way. Shin's story is a case study in that cruelty. He's the only person so far, born and raised in those camps, to get out and tell his story. But his story is more than just a tale of state-sponsored sadism. It is an escape adventure, and it's a story about the resiliency of the human spirit. The guards in North Korea, in Camp 14, spent 23 years trying to turn Shin into a blinkered, malleable slave, and they failed. They failed because he was very lucky when he was 23. A newcomer came to the camp, and this was an individual who had been raised in Pyongyang, a member of the elite. He'd been educated in the former Soviet Union. Shin's job was to teach Park, that was the guy's name, how to fix sewing machines in a uniform factory. Shin was also supposed to snitch on Park, to find out what he thought about the leadership, and then report to his superior. For the first time in his life, though, instead of snitching, Shin listened to what Park had to say. Park broke the news to him that the world was round, which was news to Shin. He told him that the United States, South Korea, China existed. But he also said, and this is what got Shin's interest, he said, if you got out of here, if you got out of this camp and went to China, you could eat grilled meat. That's what interested Shin. He started dreaming about grilled meat. Within a few weeks, Shin asked Park to escape together. Park agreed. On January 2nd, 2005, they went for the fence, the electric fence, the electrified fence that surrounds the camp. Shin was supposed to be the Mr. Inside guy in this escape attempt. He was supposed to get to the fence first. Then Park, having more knowledge of the outside world, would lead them to China. Unfortunately, as they ran towards the fence on a snowy, cold evening up in the mountains, Shin slipped and fell on his face, and Park got to the fence first. He was electrocuted on the fence. Shin did not hesitate, though. He crawled over Park's smoldering body and ran off. The Mr. Outside guy on that escape attempt, unfortunately, was dead on the fence. But Shin still, through a combination of luck, keeping his mouth shut, and being shrewd, he found his way out of North Korea in 30 days. In a year and a half, he'd found his way across China and found his way to South Korea. 2 years later, he was living in Southern California, eating at In-N-Out Burger, which he still says is the best burger in the United States. And he was working for LINK, Liberty in North Korea, as a human rights volunteer. But he's not been a very happy person outside the camp. He's struggling to understand what it means to be free. He says that he's physically outside, but not psychologically outside barbed wire. One of the things he told me is that he's evolving from being an animal into trying to be a human being, but it is going very, very slowly. Very slowly. He still has dreams about his mother's death. What's terrifying, though, is that Shin's story is not an isolated tale of horror. There are two other big adjustment problems that are going on, or that will soon go on. There are 24,000 North Koreans now living in South Korea. Almost all of them have come there in the past 12 years. Almost all of them have been examined by government psychiatrists and psychologists in South Korea, who say that virtually all of them are clinically paranoid. A useful adjustment for life in North Korea, a place that crawls with security agents, but they have a very difficult time adapting to a modern life. They have a hard time distinguishing between criticism and betrayal. And there are 24 million people in North Korea who, if that state ever collapses, will have to go through the same adjustment problems. Now, no one is thinking that North Korea is on the verge of collapse, but totalitarian systems don't last forever. And someday, all of those people will have to go through a version of what Shin has gone through. Now, the reason Shin told me his awful story was because he wants you to know that these camps are still in operation. They're still breeding children. They're still teaching them to betray their parents. He doesn't believe that knowing about this is going to overthrow North Korea. But he went through the humiliation of telling me his story and is traveling the world talking about it because he believes that knowledge is better than ignorance. Thank you very much.
Shin was asked, how do we stop the North Korean labor camps?
Traveled throughout the world. I meet a lot of different politicians, many leaders in the NGO and other organizations. But unfortunately, I really haven't been able to find a clear-cut answer or a specific answer from these people or from these meetings. And one of the things that I always do when I visit these cities, whether it's LA or Washington, D.C. or cities in Europe, is I try to find and visit any Holocaust museums that are in the world. I try to visit them as much as possible. So yesterday, during my stay here, I had the chance to visit, again, the U.S. Holocaust Museum here in Washington, D.C. And in one of the displays, there was a huge banner or picture, and there was one question that was on the wall. Why didn't people bomb the railways that led to the Nazi prison camp? That question obviously pertains to what happened in the past, 60 years ago during World War II. But my opinion is that that question still applies to what is going on right now as we speak.
그 질문에 대한 답은 우리 국제사회가 찾아야 된다고 생각해요.
And I believe the true answer or solution to that question lies with the international community, the world community at large.
Bright and early for their daily going nowhere, going nowhere. And I find it kind of funny, I find it kind of sad. The dreams in which I'm dying are the best I've ever had. I find it hard to tell